And here we go. So what I would like to do tonight is concentration, right concentration. Now you will recall that this is something I covered over about 2 weeks. I may have gone longer than that, but certainly 2 weeks on concentration when we were talking about the Atangika Magga, the Noble Eightfold, or Eight-limbed as I like to think of it now, path. But I wanted to come back and do a coda on concentration because it really is so important. And I want to come back and talk about it in a very practical way. And I really want to, I'll talk for a little bit, but I really want to have a conversation because candidly, I want to learn from what you guys are doing as well. Because we're all in our own little internal worlds when we concentrate. And it's kind of the best practices conversation we could have here. You know, what's everybody doing? I will begin by distinguishing between concentration and mindfulness. Those two words are often used synonymously, and they're not the same, mindfulness and meditation. Meditation, the three words that are used around that are mindful, ardent, and alert. Mindful is remembering what works and what doesn't work. So it's just bringing to mind what's skillful and what's unskillful, for example. Ardent is a level of energy and attentiveness. And alert is just simply noticing. But that's a broad field we're talking about there. Concentration is about focus. The word that is used with concentration in the Pali Canon is ikagata, which is usually translated as single-pointed. But I don't think it means single-pointed as in the tip of this pen. It's single-pointed as in there's one field, one arena, one area of concentration. The reason this is so important is, and I'll, hopefully as I proceed through this it will make sense, I firmly believe, and is my own experience, that without cultivating concentration, there is only so far we can go with our practice. Yeah, and that's it. So, and concentration is, it's work, it's hard work. So, when concentrate, and we know what concentration feels like when we're in conversation with, let's just say, somebody who is spiritually mature, and it doesn't have to be the Dalai Lama or the Pope. It could be your grandfather or grandmother or just, you know, everyday person, but somebody who has cultivated concentration. You are the only thing there. When they're talking with you, you know, you can feel the rest of the world has disappeared and you are the only thing there. And it is single field concentration. They're not concentrated on your eyes or your mouth or your nose or your voice or anything in particular. There's the whole of you, and noticing what it is you are bringing to the conversation and therefore how they should respond into that. We're familiar with that just from experience of, hopefully from receiving that from other people. So the traditional precursors are finding a secluded place and being secluded from unskillful states of mind. Somebody, I was on a call the other day with a group of, it was interfaith stuff, and they said, you know, the US is the only place in the world where we expect things to be silent when we meditate. It's kind of funny. And that points to something important. Yes, it's nice to be able to get away from noise. It's really kind of hard to sit on a roundabout in the middle of a busy intersection and sort of use that as a place to settle down in meditation. So it's nice to find a secluded space, and it's nice to seclude ourselves from unskillful states of mind, the hindrances in particular. But the reality is we can only go so far with that, and then it's incumbent on ourselves to create that stillness and create that silence. And we do that by paying attention. So the ways in, the standard ways into concentration, there's a lot of standard ways into concentration. In some traditions, it's a line from scripture, or you can have a picture of the guru in front of you. The Tibetan practice is visualization of a tanka. Kind of refer back and forth to the tanka until it's really well memorized, and then visualize the tanka, or visualize the deva, or whatever it is that's on the tanka. The practices that are most common in our tradition, and they're the ones I'm most familiar with, so they're the ones I'll talk to, are metta and breath practice, following the breath. So I'll come back and I'll talk about some experiences with those, and how I have found those useful, and where those have taken me in a minute. But we use our way in, and then there's a settling that happens once we find ourselves able to concentrate. Actually, another sidebar. In a lot of practices, I remember reading a book by Christmas Humphreys years ago, and I got rid of the book because this seemed such a silly thing to do. But I now realize what he was doing. Early on in the book, one of his exercises was to just concentrate on a matchbox. Just put a matchbox on the table and just concentrate on it, and see if you could concentrate on it for 30 seconds or a minute. And another one he talked about was closing your eyes and seeing if you can change the field to green and then shift it to red. These are just concentration practices. When you settle in and you really settle into your body, well, I can't say you, when I'm really settled in and I'm settled into my body, I become aware that breath is not just the air. The breath is the energy body, and I can tune into the energy body, and as I tune in more to that, I am becoming better at noticing blockages, at where at energy flows within the body, at moving energy, and at making some fairly substantial movements of energy within the body. This isn't mindfulness again, this is concentration, right? This is the ability to really settle in and notice, to concentrate. So as we settle into this concentration, things become calmer, and as they become calmer, because as we concentrate, we're excluding more, we're just not paying attention to certain stuff, and it ceases to interrupt us. So as settling happens, then we become more able to see more clearly, and as we see more clearly, more settling becomes possible. One of my there's a wonderful book by Tanisara, which I've mentioned to at least most of you before, With Each and Every Breath, I think it's called. The first half of the book is very basic meditation stuff, where he talks about working with the hindrances, and it's really masterfully done. But then almost casually he moves on into just steps through the jhanas. He steps through going down into the material jhanas, the form jhanas, and then just casually talks about moving into the formless jhanas, and does that all the way through, and then lets go of everything. And what he's doing as he goes through that, he's talking about how as we settle in and concentrate more, we're able to see ever more subtle fabrications. All of the world as we see it is a story we're making up, right? We all know this. And his point is, and again, experientially, he is correct. I agree with him. As we settle in, we start to notice more and more the elements of story we're creating, and the extent to which they are obstructions, and we can start letting those go. So at some point as we settle into the breath itself just becomes heavy. The breath itself is too gross, too heavy, too substantial for this more refined level of concentration, this more subtle level of concentration. So we let that go as well. It's really interesting to move through these levels, if you will. Noise is another one, and noise is a big one. So, one of my favorite examples, the leaf blower goes on outside. It's doing nobody any harm. The only problem that happens is when we go out to meet it. But as we settle down, we can notice, if you like, the conversation that goes on between us and the leaf blower. And it is a two-directional conversation, because first what's happening is there's this external bombardment of our senses. So there's something coming in and we're letting it in. And as we develop our ability to concentrate, we can start more and more to notice that intrusion and notice us letting it in. Separately, and it is a separate experience, there's the going out to it, the what is this, who's doing that, where is this? There is an energy outflow in the direction of that noise. So the concentration allows us to notice this exchange and notice this flow. And as we notice that with this more settled concentration, we can start to exercise some control over that flow. And control becomes kind of important in this, because control is not one of the primary attributes of mindfulness. Control of the senses, control of experience, is all important to helping us settle. So in that book I just talked about, Thanissaro, he's stepping through all of the jhanas, and at the end of it, it's just you let go of the last fabrication and abracadabra. Consciousness without surface, consciousness that does not land. Elsewhere, he is very clear in saying, and he's somewhat of a scriptural literalist, so I think he's picking this up from the Pali Canon as well, but he said you don't need to go through all the jhanas to wake up. But he does say you need to have at least some experience of jhanas, which is to say, there are other ways to move to this final waking up experience, but it's not going to happen unless we've developed that basic level of concentration. There's an entry level of concentration, an entry level of being able to settle down, that is a necessary core part of the practice. One of the other pieces of this settling and being able to see more clearly as things get more still, is we can start to look at the elements in our field of consciousness and notice, and this is the story of Bahia, who he was the Indian on the far side of, he was the practitioner on the far side of India, who it was suggested to him he go and find the Buddha, and he marched across India, found him, and asked him 3 times. Buddha was begging for food, so not a good time, he said, but after 3 requests you have to answer. So Buddha said, okay, what is it? And he said he was struggling. So Buddha said, and what is the core practice? And Buddha said, it's just this. When there is a sound, when you hear, there is just sound. When you see, there is just vision. When you smell, there's just the smell, and so on. And he said, and when that's all there is, then there's no here and there's no there, and just this is the end of suffering. So that's when we settle down, this influx and outflux with the leaf blower is to start to see that as a phenomenon and not relate to the content, but just the phenomenon. So it's an object of mind, and it is just an object of mind at that level. It's not to judge it, not to say it's not there, but it's not to start telling stories about the content. And we can bring that, and that's sort of an externally oriented thing, so that kind of makes sense. But we can bring that internally as well, and we can completely shift the way we relate to this. And an obvious one is pain. It's possible to shift the way we relate to our own suffering, our own physical pain, our own mental pain, and look at that again as phenomena rather than get caught in the story. Because in an important sense, that is not me. I am not the worst thing I ever did, as I've forgotten his name, Stevenson, the EGR guy, Brian Stevenson. I am not the worst thing I ever did. I am not the anger that I feel. I'm not the happiness that I feel. These are upon me. In the same way, all of these things are just events, and choosing to identify with them is a choice. It's not to say they're not there, but they are events. And if we shift the way we relate to those events, we end up just recognizing those sense events and the consciousness around those sense events. Yeah, I think that's enough. Let me shut up, because I would like to